Welcome, everybody. Nice to be here with you all. I'm really pleased to be joined by David Ostir from Camac Group. David is an entrepreneur doing all kinds of amazing things in the real estate space. And we're going to kind of dive into each one of the different businesses that make up the Camac Group. Just really excited. He's speaking to many stakeholders on a daily basis, and so he's a great source of inspiration, but also insight into what's playing at this moment. So not only are we going to dive into his businesses and how those are going and how they're making a difference in the real estate space, but also the smart space. But also we're going to discuss the industry at large, what's going on, what are the influence factors, what are the things that are driving decisions at this moment, and what should we be thinking about from a smart building space to make sure that we're helping that situation and supporting people in their journeys. So without further ado, I'm going to bring David on the stage and we're going to dive into it. David, how are you?
Hi, Nicholas. Well, I'm great, thank you. Thank you for having me and saying such nice things about us. It's a pleasure being part of Smart Building Collective and what you're doing and how you're progressing. It's amazing. So looking forward to our discussion today.
Yeah, it's been fantastic, and you guys have been there from early on. We first certified an amazing hostel together, the Dragon's Dream in Slovenia, which we can talk about as well, which is a fully autonomous smart building, no staff on site, giving people still a user experience that gives them everything that they need in that hostel experience.
I have to correct you. There is a person on site, and it's about creating personal experience. So that's what we saw after a while of being, humanless, as it were. That it requires a human touch when it comes to experience and smoothing things over. So I wouldn't say completely, but the aim was to be, staffless, as it were.
And I think when we certified, that was a hypothesis.
Correct.
That was going to be a challenge in going to tech. That there's still a human interaction required.
That was a great insight that we got also from your part. And at the time, I think we were kind of made our mind that we can do it without a person on site. But then we saw after a while that it requires it, and it enhanced user and visitor experience to a different level. But that's what the journey should be about. So like working with Smart Building Collective and with us, and with developing ideas, you sort of set. You conceptualize something, and then you see how it reacts in the real world, and you attune to it.
Yeah. And I think that's what we're seeing across the board with smart, right? Is that it's not something that you just buy and you're done with. It's a continuous process of improvement, tweaking, adjusting, changing, making sure that you're getting more out of it whenever possible.
Correct. Well, we've been seeing. Very two kinds of investors. Ones who, I think your experience is much broader, but I think it's very similar. A lot of companies who are, let's say, innovators or early adopters of technology, they are looking at this. Let's put the tech in and see what we can get out of it, which is sort of very innovators-like idea. Then that you tune it down, so you first fully spec and then see what you actually use and come back from it. As opposed to, let's say, hostel was the other way around, was where investor knew that they wanted to be fully autonomous due to certain reasons. They didn't want to have anything to do with business on site, and they wanted to have as seamless operation without anyone as possible, so as lean as possible as well. Also knowing that their customer base is going to be very specific and niche, so younger crowd and so forth, who are very attuned with technology. And I think those are the two that you're seeing today mostly taking place, and I think in years to come it's going to shape better and better. So you have, whether that being innovators or developers with certain products, or retrofitting companies who will understand how technology is boosting their performance, or cutting their costs. I think there are many ways and options that you can utilize data, technology, and so forth, but it really depends on use case, your strategy, your customers, and it should be, well, one, a development sort of a strategy ongoing all the time, because the data pools will get bigger and bigger as technology is being adopted widely, or more and more. I think any building with even retrofitting, you get more and more sort of data points that you can collect from whether that being lights, mechanical, like the simple stuff that you maybe don't think about in a holistic strategy about how smart the building is, but yet you can collect certain points that already make up of a certain database that can assist you in making decisions, whether that being energy efficiency or boosting experience, or let's say
Endless. Yeah.
endless. Yeah, it's yeah, correct. Yeah. It's a start, I think, and we'll see. It'll be interesting to see how companies really position themselves as leader with certain products that will suit them best, and they know what they're doing, coming in, doing it, and moving forward. Definitely, well, what we have been seeing is a massive driver of the two. It's not just smart, but ESG. I think we talked about it as well. It's like two levers, or helping each other to go forward. Then adding COVID, we keep on going back to it, but it's not because of COVID. It's more about the knock-on consequence it had on commercial real estate, and whether that being leisure, that being office, probably, well, suffered the most, especially in the bigger cities. I would say smaller, not so much, at least from what we're getting from, let's say, Central and Southeastern Europe. Occupancy rates are quite high, and there's not much on the market as opposed to, I would say, like London, New York, Paris, and Amsterdam is a little bit of a different story, because you also have to account for commute and so forth. So people don't really want to come in maybe every day of the week. But for certain countries, I would say that commercial real estate office sector is developing and is strong, and I think it's going to be stronger and stronger. What we've been seeing, so let's say Slovenia, Croatia, Serbia, Bulgaria, Romania, even Macedonia. I think those markets we can expect the growth, and with it also we're seeing now that technology is already being part of it. So now certain developers or investors understand it, but I would say most of them not really, or at least not really what's their end goal with it, or how they're gonna position themselves on the market. It's more about attaining certificates, whether that being well or being, I would say, well, they mostly start with DGMB, Elite, or BREEAM, so more environmentally focused. And then well is the second in row, I would say, and then third would be smart, but that's also because that's how they've been sort of developed now. Environmentally focused.
I think we definitely need to dive into that, into what's driving different aspects. But I think a good start for us today is first, who is Camac Group? What are you guys doing? What are the different pillars of it? And then I'd love to kind of start diving into these insights, because I think there's a lot to unpack there.
I'll try to be brief with Camac. I don't even know what we are or who we are ourselves. We are developing every day and changing slightly, I would say. But few of the main pillars that we developed through years, I think we're quite organically, because we're all coming from commercial real estate office sector, mostly all the partners. And we started with design and build company focusing on workplace environments, and expanding from that to that focus still is with CAMAC Space, from forging strategies for our companies that we work with, to design and building, mostly in Southeastern Europe region. So I would say from Austria or Slovenia all the way down to Turkey. That's our region and where our focus is when it comes. And then through working in strategy, trying to set the strategies for organizations, and then how to align those when we're talking about the workplace specifically, and today also ESG, how all that ties in together in workplace, again, not holistically, but just at one specific niche. We came to realize that we don't collect, well, we would like to collect more data and be more confident in our decisions. And as we're quite, I would say, well, younger crowd, we believe in data, and without data, there's not much you can do. Hence how quite organically we started developing cruXera, which is a tool that helps you collect, or I would say more than collect, is look at the data and what can we do with it? What does the data tell us? So we're focused on employee experience, well-being. So experience mostly comes from, well, not mostly, but exclusively comes from employees themselves. So how they're attuned with space, how they're feeling in the space, what's their day-to-day experience. Then is well-being, which is a mix of employees' experience about the space, as well as smart devices, if they do have them. So sensors that give us what's the quality of the air, light, and so forth and so forth. So that's a second pillar, and the third is ecology, how actually the buildings are being used and utilized. And we saw that with basically any organization, their utilization data or their understanding how the space is being used is extremely poor, and they they don't fully understand how they use it. And one of the first in the world to take advantage of that, I think, was, well, I believe, was WeWork, because they had occupancy rates in excess of 138% per desk, which means for 100 employees, you had 100, sorry, for 100 desks, you could have 138 employees. And as WeWork saw it, most of the world would run very similar to it. You might have some deviations with lawyers and so forth, very specific niches, but most of the companies would, even today, be in the same region. So that means that you're paying for 40% of your real estate worldwide or locally that you most probably don't have to. And this is where we saw also a massive tie into ESG. So again, cutting down the footprint that has knock-on effect on ESG. But altogether, it was meant, and it is meant, that we work with data. So there's obviously still some personal touches to the strategy or craft, but I think data takes a lot out of it and even opens to eyes to any leadership team. At least that's what we have been seeing, and it's been extremely successful. We are developing and expanding from Europe and US today. So that's cruXera, to touch on that. And then CAMAC itself would like to, the aim is to stay within real estate, maybe broader sense, but we are touching on ESG strategies, so how to align your portfolio or asset into it. Does it make sense? How, when, with where, what, and how to start. Regionally, we see a lot of potential as well, but also globally. Just reach is limited as always, and I think more you know your region, the better you can be, because it's all about, well, not all, but it's very important that you understand micro trends as well as macro, how they gonna impact your region. And Southeastern Europe seems like a very interesting region to be in, a part of Europe and developing quite nicely, which also gives a great opportunity because most of the Europe is quite developed in a sense. So there will be much greater need for retrofits, which we still have to figure out. It's a tough cookie to break, and we'll see how that one will go due to many restrictions on existing buildings, especially the ones that are listed. It's very hard to make them, well, sustainable in any sense or environmentally friendly. Whereas with the new builds, you can see the biggest impact you have is embodied carbon when you build. However, most of the new buildings you can see that are going towards at least some sort of certification. So more and more developers, wherever they're building, whatever they're building, they are at least slightly thinking about ESG. And we had now first government project submitted to us in Slovenia that would like to follow one of the environmental standards. Now, whether that's going to be LEED,
Awesome.
BREEAM, or DGMB, we'll see. But that, I think, it's a massive step as well, that we can see that everybody is sort of not just on board, but thinking. They might not go for platinum or gold or the top standards, but I think those are anyway a little bit more show off rather than necessity.
Yeah, I mean, as long as there's appetite for improvement and diving into it and making meaningful changes, that's all we can hope for. When we speak to universities, when we speak to municipalities, the certification is a side subject, right? It's not that interesting. What's interesting is the transformation, the innovation, the change management that needs to happen within the organization to understand these things differently. That's really where I think we see a lot of potential in supporting that change. But so CAMAC Space is about creating beautiful, functional, useful spaces. cruXera is taking that and pulling data out of it with your smart building platform, giving you insights to actually make proper changes. And then the Camac Group is looking for lots of other ways to support when it comes to ESG and health and well-being and human performance and these kinds of things.
And any innovation in the real estate space, we're just fascinated by it. It's the biggest asset in the world, and we see not just massive potential, but a great need for digitalization, improvement, and so forth. And I think with it, we'll see a lot of new business models coming up, as well as different branches sort of entering into real estate world.
So we agree completely, because we're the Smart Building Collective, all about digitization, smart solutions. But I'm going to challenge you right now, because I think if I look at all of our partners within the Smart Building Collective, we're all, of course, kindred spirits who are trying to digitize things and gadgets and technology and data and finding new and better ways to do it. But you're someone who is a natural networker. You're speaking to everybody. You're working with a lot of different kind of real estate companies and people. But let's start by taking a step back. What is driving the real estate industry right now? What is motivating those decisions at the moment, right? Because I think what we're doing is often we're putting in tech for the sake of tech.
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing it because it's super interesting, but it's also being challenged at the moment. So, what do you see?
The biggest drivers that we see on the market, I think ESG, definitely. I would say almost number one, but it's not really number one. It's number two, because number one is always about occupancy and the projects, how the assets can make money for their owners or managers. So I would say number one that we have been seeing is how to differentiate themselves on the market. I think I think we see there's been a lot of speculation and changes going on, especially in the office market. Again, due to COVID and hybrid, and certain cities having quite a impactful last couple of years, drawing quite a lot of attention to what those assets can be turned to, and can there be different products fitted in to sort of revive them or turn them around. So I would say number one will always be, at least from what we've been saying, I wouldn't say always, I think that's a bit strong word, but definitely it is name of the game at the moment, is return on investment, IRR, driving growth, profits, and so forth. So that's number one. And it will always stay, just depend on which market and what you're looking for and what are your interests. However, more and more we're seeing ESG being a massive part to it. So a massive partner to sort of funding and money is whether or not the assets are or are going to be, or was the case, how to get them to be ESG compliant, and if not, they're sort of already being seen as, I wouldn't say stranded assets, but definitely as a gray assets. They would like to get rid of them as soon as possible. Some of them are, I think, even trying at the moment to still get a decent dollar for them, till they're not just yet classified too bad, and not many others know. But I think more and more we're seeing that in Slovenia as well. I can't really tell the name of one of our clients, but they're offloading massive portfolio, mostly due to ESG. They know that they cannot handle that many assets to be retrofitted. Those are mostly buildings where age is about between 30 to 50 years. It varies, but you would need to invest substantial amount of effort and money to bring them to ESG standard. And this is where we see a massive opportunity. So ESG, money, ESG, and then digitalization as well. It's a massive driver. And why I say this is because if you don't have data, you sort of have very limited ESG overview. You might think you're doing something, but till you have real-time data on your consumption and so forth, it's quite hard. And at the same time, if you do not have data, you don't know or understand how far you are to get to compliance levels. So to forge or create or prepare a strategy that would sort of work for any investor organization, you would need to start with collecting data, looking at the assets, and then being innovator, as you said, like we're ourselves. You try things. There's still not many proven things. Yes, you know that you improve something, but that doesn't mean that every concept will fit, because there are so many different assets with different environments and so forth. So you have to be wary of those as well. But I think as we develop the market of digitalization, so basic starts of collecting data, I think that should be number one. Number two, how does that tie into ESG? And also three, how does that fit into your business model, your product? So who are you going to be on the market? How are you going to differentiate yourself, or where do you see opportunities? Because there also might be opportunities that others aren't seeing at the moment. And this is what I see as one of the biggest opportunities in next maybe even 20 years, I think, is fair to say, in real estate. There is and will be so much opportunity, is incredible. For example, that hostel concept that we spoke about was sort of innovator's approach. Let's try to squeeze as many rooms as we can on the smallest space. Let's cut out the OPEX, so operational expenditure, by eliminating any people that you can. But that was very business or innovator driven decision, because hostel is not making crazy amounts of money. Let's say at the moment it's about 200K, but a year profit, so it's not bad. But as soon as you would employ let's say 2-3 individuals, that is cut down, I wouldn't say to zero, but drastically. So this is where we see technology being a great opportunity to enhance and open up also market for young travelers and so forth. So as we're developing that hostel that we are now expanding in Slovenia, another location, Croatia, first location is going to be this year as well. So from a strategy point of view, I think it's an amazing opportunity and it's, I would say, the least glorified hospitality product, or one of the least glorified hospitality products on the market. Yet, in terms of making money, I think it's one of the best.
Well, hospitality is a that's an interesting word, right? Because I think hospitality means of that human service in a way, right? I think. But I think as a place to stay, it's
we beg to differ. No?
It's more than comfortable, and it's a nice environment to be in.
But trying to. I would like to correct you there. I agree, but it depends what you expect from hospitality. Let's say, we're then more looking on how to create also environment where young individuals will share their experiences. So they have a communal spaces. So it's a different type of experience and hospitality we're going for, which is much less driven by, let's say, human experience that you have on every corner, and is enhanced by or mitigated by technology, and at the same time opens up also avenues for young people to travel, feel safe, and have, well, are being able to afford it as well. Because hotels and our hostel, the difference in cost in Ljubljana, it's substantial. We're talking probably £100 or so euros a night difference, and again, very niche, very specific to, I would say, young. It's not that you cannot visit; it's just more suited for younger generation of travelers, and we see this is a way that we can connect Europe on a great level. Also with the trains, I think it are becoming a big part of real estate redevelopment throughout Europe. So we see it as a massive opportunity to have central locations with hostels for individuals between 18 to, I would say, 26, 28, as a great way to visiting cities and exploring Europe, or I would say hopefully one day we move to US and Asia and other parts of the world as well. But we understand the trade-off, and we knew it when we started. You also at Smart Building Certification pointed out as a collective quite nice that that's going to be a challenge, and it was. And now we're trying to mitigate it by, I would say, an one individual per hostel that creates that experience
Well,
that we're seeking.
you can also create that hospitality experience digitally, right? Like there is, I mean, there's no shortage of technology in the world. I think it's about how you use it and how you make sure that, you know, the human interaction with that technology is met in a meaningful way. But just to summarize kind of the motivational structures right now that are or the focus areas is valuation, ROI, making sure that your real estate makes money. ESG is coming in at your second, where you say, well, you need to make sure that you can keep the asset running. The moment that that asset is no longer compliant, then that revenue gets put under pressure. And then, of
Correct.
course, digitization is helping you to quantify, measure, report on that ESG to keep your real estate. And I think that that's quite a nice, you know, laddered approach that shows, you know.
I think the last one, sorry to interrupt you, but just the last one is not at that stages yet. I would say that the last one is the stages that you purely collect data, but I see it as one day, as we spoke on many occasions, of, well, real-time reporting, where you will be able to have your portfolios in different grades of ESG compliancy or non-compliancy, and even at different rates of whether a building is, let's say, LEED Platinum or bronze or silver or gold, whatever it is. I think that should be one day there will be a chance, and with the data captured, you'll be able to do that in real time.
Yeah, and you know where we're going is autonomous, where the building reacts and acts based on that data automatically, and having AI layers on your building as well to query it for whatever kind of questions you might have. You know, we had some. I was at a workplace consultancy type dinner last night, and the interest in those AI layers where you can be like, what kind of performance is this space giving me? That's coming. You know, it's just real estate is quite slow in getting there in comparison to other industries, but it's definitely happening because once you have that data, you can start to feed different avenues. So for us, it's, you know, first get that data and make sure it's data that's meaningful, and then start to use it. But what kind of, you know, with that as the backdrop of kind of what are the driving motivations in real estate? What are the external factors that are driving that motivation? And then when I say external factors, like what are the real external factors, right? Because we have sometimes it's like scaling a business. Sometimes you have false positives where you think that that's kind of what's what's driving the industry, but what would you say is truly driving the industry from an external factor perspective?
When we're talking about the real estate, I think it's all still very basic. I think it's supply and demand. I think it just as world is expanding and let's say again talking purely regionally, there's not enough or there's a room to still facilitate many data centers in the region, logistics centers to help with last mile deliveries and to keep everything closer, as well as not just the real estate as an asset, I would say, but also real estate as infrastructure. So that those are those two drivers that we see as, I wouldn't say main ones, but very basic and biggest drivers as it go forward. And then whatever external factors are as region somewhere or whichever region is developing, you can see if something was developing, I would say, let's say, guessing Amsterdam in last 30, 40 years, you could probably say that Belgrade is doing a very similar thing today due to talent pool it has available for the companies, major companies entering the market of having not potentially just call centers as it were, but also R&D centers. So all those drivers, I think, are externally are the main ones driving the real estate when it comes to office, so commercially logistics, data centers. I think those are massive ones and will be for years to come. Always residential. I think that's almost like self-explanatory. Whole Europe has housing. I wouldn't say crisis, but there's not enough houses to feed and to give them to young couples, individuals, and so forth. So there's always opportunities for greenfield, potentially even brownfield. So as we said, if there are stranded assets in the city centers, maybe those, when you rethink them, should be turned or could be turned into, well, hotel is again one, or potentially even flats now that you could whether rent out or sell. It's purely up to investors and their strategy or how they work with municipality and what also is certain municipalities' goal or states' goal to develop. But I think from our perspective, those are still very basic ones. I think ESG is sort of pushing certain things forward, as we mentioned. I think digitalization is a massive opportunity. Whoever is seizing it early on will be, well, making great strides and really understanding where they're making not just profits, but where they have value to add, how competitive they are, when they're going to be able to look at the asset, look at the location, understand, I wouldn't say immediately, but quite fast, what can they do with it, or if there's a different use potential that would be much better for certain location again. But externally, those would be the main factors for us. And let's say if we go again locally, Croatia has entered Schengen and taken on Euro. I don't want to lie, but I think it was this year. I think it was, or last year. Don't hold me for the word, but I think so. But that's a massive change, and you could see that it's not just about joining European Union, but once you have same currency as the rest of Union, more and more investments are flowing in, and that will again.
But there are regulations that you are subject to adhering to based on being a part of the EU, right?
Correct, and that opens up again a decent market. Croatia has, I believe, 4 million in population. Again, don't hold me for it. And massive coastline or extremely long coastline where a lot of Europeans come to visit for the summer. So if we talk about hospitality, yeah, and when it comes to hospitality and investments at the moment, well, there is, I don't know how to put it nicely, but it's insane how much is going on. It's just a lot of hotels, developments, new concepts. So it's also interesting to see a developing part of the world that is not settled yet they're sort of getting the best of both worlds. They're getting new ideas and experiences from all around the world that are sort of making sense or had been making sense investment-wise, with some potentially new and disruptive frameworks and innovators approach, I think there are a few extremely interesting products on the market coming up, but still are mainly driven, I would say, as we said, by how many tourists you have every year. At the end of the day, it's quite simple. And even though we try to make it very complicated, but it's not that complicated. Is how many tourists come every year. For that, you have to have as good roads as you can possibly can, train ideally, many flights coming in and out, so many airports, so infrastructure has to support it, all that you're building. And then on top of that, you have to have an offering for different market segments, for different sort of families, individuals, and so forth, that you can cater to them during the summer. And again, we're seeing
Right,
a massive.
I think you hit it on the head, right? I think there's a lot of external factors that are very much local driven. Real estate is a local game, right?
Mm-hmm.
As much as we want to make it a global, thing, it's just not. And each city has its own challenges. Some of them are just getting going on that trajectory. Some of them, like where I am in Amsterdam, there's a whole lot of regulation to slow things down in a way. Like let's get less tourists to come to Amsterdam, and let's figure out how to limit that amount. And so yeah, I think it's just really interesting to hear your view on that, and that brings me to kind of my next question is, we were recently in the Verdantix report on smart building certifications, and there's 4 of them in the world that are kind of broad focused, and we were really pleased and honored to be seen as the European certification, as well as more of the academic view, as in that we have like a peer review and these types of things. But they talked about 170 certifications in that report for buildings, right? Just crazy, and that's only what they
Been able to find, yeah.
yeah, exactly. That's only what they registered in that report. But from you, which kind of certifications are being seen as useful, and which we don't have to talk too much about which ones are not, but which ones are being seen as useful, and where do you guys start when you're in a project? Where if a developer comes and says, which ones do I need? Where do we start? How do we get them to kind of follow a path that is not overwhelming and yet still delivering incredible value, right? I think, and we see, and it's probably country by country, it's probably local. I mean, in Norway, we just certified a building that, Norway BREEAM in use is the standard. Everybody's doing BREEAM in use. But what are you seeing? How are you kind of steering your customers?
I would stop on first point that you mentioned, that real estate is very local, and having a pleasure living in London for 11 years and working in London for 11 years, and now coming sort of back to Slovenia and the region, you can see a massive discrepancy between one and the other. Even during the COVID, the way people react to it, how many days they want to spend in the office. So I cannot emphasize enough how I agree with you in terms of local is much more important than I would say global. Maybe with certain products you can go global, but you really need to understand what drives local ambitions, and that also transfers to your next point or question when it comes to certification. Well, one we've been seeing, I think, for a while now, that certain developers, and I wouldn't even call them early adopters, I would call them innovators at the moment, that we're doing, mostly incredible new feats with buildings, and mostly going for platinum or top of the top, where I think our approach has always been, depending which market you're in and who do you want to be on the market. And also, I would say it also matters how long are you planning to hold on to your asset. What I'm trying to say is, if let's say you go for a new development, wherever that is, and you go for lead platinum, well platinum, and let's say so it's top of the top, all of them. If you're offloading an asset and exiting, you have nothing to offer to the next one, or very little for them to improve. Hence, you most probably limited also your exits. You have the best of the best of the best, and if that building is reasonably let out, you're not leaving much space for improvement, as it were. You have to sort of take care of the building, but I think those type of assets will eventually end up in pension funds' hands and sort of be cruising along for next 10, whatever, 15, maybe even 20 years, and trying to keep those standards if they can, and that's one. But our approach is always a bit more looking at exactly what your strategy is, what is the competition on the market, how you want to position yourself, and what are you getting out of it. So let's say if for you to achieve certain top standards, you might be paying quite a premium to achieve that, and it might not make sense for you as an asset owner. I mean, you might not even want to. Maybe your main goal is to be environmentally friendly, so maybe you always want to be at the top of the game when it comes to DGNB, LEED, BREEAM, and any of those three. You said 170, which I find it fascinating. At Veteran Trigger report, I have to look at that. But I think those three are like widely recognized in the world, and not just gaining traction, but they've sort of positioned themselves for DGNB to be most of the continental Europe, because it comes out of Germany. You still see certain BREEAM or LEED projects, but most of those will stem from LEED would mostly stem from American investors, because it's an American sort of framework, and BREEAM is UK. But I think all three are quite comparable, and I wouldn't say they're that much different. I'm sure all of them will beg to differ, but at the end of the day, they all focus mostly on environmental part, and I think they all hit quite well on it.
Yeah.
Then you come to well or fit well or some others that you have when it comes to, I would say, out of ESG on S. I think well is quite nice to do. I'm well AP myself and DGNB advisor, and I have something with smart building as well. We don't know what that is yet, whether assessor or not, but we've done a few things that it would really depend, like I say, on an investor. So our recommendation wouldn't be one, other, or third, or three, all three together. For certain companies that I wouldn't say they don't care about the environment, because I think nobody does not care about the environment, but maybe they want to emphasize well more because they want to attract employees in that sense. It might, and they have also limited influence on environmental reason for whatever that is, might be going for well. But at the end of the day, I think we have to bear in mind is a big difference whether you're a tenant, an owner, or a co-owner of an asset. Because if you don't have an asset overview as a whole, you're, I wouldn't say limited that you cannot do anything, but you are fairly limited. So what I'm trying to say, if the asset as a whole is not compliant with something, or the owner or other owners are not looking to upgrade it to a level where it becomes compliant or achieves, like you said, BREEAM in operation, well, then you might have a challenge to achieve those. No? So then you should start looking at different things. No? But you should know and start with a strategy. So consider what is important to you, on which locations, now whether that is an asset or a portfolio of assets. What would you like to achieve? What you also believe and market tells you that is achievable. So, for example, if you're Microsoft that has offices probably in every single country in the world, it's going to be tricky for them to have all of them, I don't know, in ESG brackets. So you also have to be quite realistic, and you can have certain things that you can do quite fast and get out of certain leases or sell or offload certain assets that you believe will be, well, very hard to upgrade. On the other hand, if you're looking for to renew a lease, let's say again, for example, in Slovenia, and you see that the new building that will tick the box when it comes to your strategy as a corporation come available and space for you is available, I think those type of moves should happen and will happen. Now, whether it being a year, 2, 3, I think those will happen. And depending on what you're doing and consider when you're starting, then analyzing where you are as a whole and as one, and then seeing where you want to go. So model the data and see which assets or locations can be done faster or easier,
Yeah.
and then align that and then go for it, I think. And that will depend whether you want to go for smart building certification, if that is, let's say, the goal for you, or whether LEED or BREEAM or DGMB or mix of all of them. I think even mix is not bad. I think it will beg a question how the data can flow from one to another for you to report on ESG. And I think ESG sort of in real estate falls under GRASP mostly when it comes then to SFDR, when it comes to reporting. So
I think you hit on some really interesting, kind of an interesting process and priority flow, right? It's like you're looking local, you're looking at your compliancy for EU taxonomy, in our case from Europe, CSRD. You might have some local laws that you need to be adhering to. And you need to look at the certifications and the technology that's going to help you prove that and report on that and show compliance on that. And then I think
correct.
your final layer that you're talking about is looking at your market and looking at your goals and what you're trying to do within that market and what is kind of accepted in the market, or even what sets you apart or differentiates you in that market. And that would then be your kind of final decision flow of which ones you choose and what technologies you choose.
Correct. We have been seeing also that majority of early or late majority of the public is not fully aware, not even of LEED, BREEAM, and DGMB, which have been on the market for a long time. So also general public and leadership has to be, well, has to be. We're making all, I think, an effort to educate them. What does it mean to achieve those certifications? Or if you're looking for a tenancy, what does it mean if you're going into a building that adheres or has achieved one of those or one of the 3 or 4 certifications? And on the other side, on the developers, asset owners or operators, it's a task, a strategy in one hand. So they're sort of why are they better than somebody else on the market, or who are they looking for? But at the same time, also to educate the market in certain instances, what does it really mean? Because I think ESG has been the easiest one to explain. So not to go too far with DGMB, LEED, and what are the benefits, or BREEAM or WELL or Smart Buildings collective certification. Of the easiest one has been, you're not going to be ESG compliant in this asset in next years to come. So, or this one is already compliant. I think that what we have been gaining from the market has been the simplest sort of argument why choose something or why not, or what to think of. And to dive deeper, I don't think there is much of understanding on the markets yet of what does it really mean. What's the difference between DGMB and LEED?
Yeah, so I think that's it's a good closing question. I mean, it's amazing we've already burned through an hour, and it's amazing how much we can talk about. And I've just in this conversation, it encourages me that we're doing a lot of the right things. What we're working on right now is an alignment of how does your smart building infrastructure feed all of those different aspects, but also how do we analyze, what the value is of your smart or your building in its current form. And I think there would be really interesting to start to combine external data and thinking about what's going on in the market space, and bringing those different worlds kind of together. I have my views of where it's all going, and I'm incredibly excited about it because just in the smart building collective alone, there's a ton of incredibly smart companies and technologies and real estate developers and real estate users that are all trying to crack the code and push this next frontier. And I think we're going to definitely help them do that in a lot of meaningful ways. But for you, where is real estate going, and what can we anticipate, in the next 5, 10 years? What's your read on the future?
Oh, it's a tough question.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
if you had the answer, you would.
I
You
don't
would.
think a seismic changes will happen. I think more and more data and digitalization will definitely be the biggest driver of the future. EAG is a nice lever. Obviously, you're looking at revenues and how to improve them. But I think data and technology will make custom-made solutions for very niche products. And I think real estate will become more and more product focused. I'm not saying it isn't right now or companies are not trying, but I think it's gonna even improve on that. And they'll be able to tell you a story or attract you with certain things. That's one. And I think as a knock-on consequence, you're gonna have much more, I wouldn't say just smarter, but operationally greater assets that you have today, which will have lower consumption of energy. And even if you start to balance that with the rent, let's say even in Ljubljana in certain buildings, it's not really fair. And somebody says, I don't know, a rent is 20 euros, but then per square meter, and then expenditure or energy is, let's say, 6. So let's say if I have a building that costs 25 and is LEED certified, and we have €1 per square meter, we're on par. You're sort of hiding a little bit of a cost, not, and but that we see also as a massive improvement, and that's one thing that I think we should and must work towards to be more environmentally friendly, and will happen. And I think those are the main ones. So individualization and product niche to be on a greater level, in my opinion, and data. And you can't. We might not know exactly what we're doing with it yet, but definitely as we start to figure it out more and more, I think it's just gonna be better and better, not worse and worse. And I think then you can sort of start having a balance of real estate, its performance, experience for individuals, whether being in the office, at home, hospitality, tailor-made solutions, but to your sort of needs and preferences, from I don't know, temperature when you walk into the room to etc. Well, many possible solutions. No? But overall, uh, I think there's going to be a positive outlook to it. Now, even though maybe some of the assets at the moment seem are stranded or are defaulting, but that is also an opportunity to rethink what they can do with them, to sort of again have a meaning in the society.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, your insights, your continued collaboration and commitment to doing great stuff. And we'll be in touch to do more soon.